Hey everyone. So today we're going to take a look at setting up TrackIR from scratch. And the reason I want to do this is I get a request multiple times a month, sometimes multiple times a week, to send somebody my TrackIR profile, and I feel like that's just not the right way to go because everybody's monitor distance is different, their size is different, and so because of that, if you use somebody else's TrackIR setup and don't set it up properly for yourself, you're going to give yourself a headache, you're going to increase your eye strain, and overall it's just not going to be a fun experience. And I think that everybody should learn to set it up for their setup. Anyway, so today we're going to do that, and let's jump right in. Okay, so I'm going to assume that everybody has it installed and at least working to some extent. I have a new monitor here. I haven't set up this one for my new setup here anyway, so I actually need to do this, and this is a great reason to do it to begin with. So the first thing we want to do is I want to talk about the camera placement. So the camera up here, I have it up on the top of the monitor. Usually works better above and sits nicely on top of a monitor. You actually don't want to put it in the center. So the center of my monitor is here. And whoops. I don't actually want to have it centered because the camera needs to read the TrackIR clip and it's off to the left. If you have the clip that sits on top of the hat, then center monitor is fine. If you have the Pro clip like I do, you want to put it off to the left, your point of view left. The second point is the clip itself. You want the clip to extend off your head. You want it to be up and down. And let me actually switch cameras here. So if you look at my setup, I have mine off the left side of my head and it extends outward. I don't want to put it close to the headset. I want to actually extend it out. I want to tilt it so that the lights are mostly up and down. So once you get everything positioned properly, you're going to want to boot up the software. And the first place you're going to want to start is down here where it says Advanced Settings. So you want to go to the camera. Now, in the camera settings, we'll go over each one of these real quick here. The very first one is status LEDs, true or false. That's the status LEDs up on the camera. I leave them on because I like to know that it's reading it. You'll get 2 green lights as opposed to one missing up in the top of the camera. So we leave that on. The brightness of those status LEDs, just however you want. If you want them bright, you want them not bright, doesn't matter. The camera rotation. Now this is where if you were to stick it on the right hand side, or if you were silly and put it up on the top sticking straight up, you would want to rotate the camera in that so that your left is actually left and right is right and up and down and vice versa. If you just rotate the camera, if you were just put the clip on the other side, everything would be wonky and not work properly. The light filter threshold. Now we'll go over this view in a second, but if you slide this up and down, you can see that the IR points grow and shrink. This is how much IR light the camera is sensing, not how much is being emitted from the emitters on the Pro clip. So this setting is probably a bit more needed if you're using the Track clip versus the Pro clip. The Pro clip emits the light, the Track clip reflects it. The next one is the IR brightness. Now this you can turn up and down, and it effectively turns the brightness of the IR lights up and down. I don't need that. I put it all the way down to the minimum. If you're in a brighter room, maybe you need it, but for me, works fine. I've never had to slide this up and down. Video processing mode, we want to put in precision, and I'm assuming standard is just a little bit less precise. You can see it actually is using a different resolution here, so everything's a little bit smaller. But we'll go back up to precision because I like things to be precise. And then smoothing, I've never changed this. I set it to 100. It doesn't have a slider. I don't feel like typing anything in. I just leave that alone. Okay, so once we're done setting up the camera, one thing you want to check before you move on to setting everything up is that your camera works and senses your TrackIR clip or Pro clip at every angle that your head might be in. And what I mean by that is I have to actually tilt my clip upward, and if I leave it flat, I can't do this because the camera's up there, right? And so it's looking down. And these are pointed straight towards the monitor, so they're not actually pointed at the camera. What happens is, as I come down to the left, you can see the dots turn red. That means that 2 of the points are crossing, and it can no longer tell what the 3D space is movement-wise for your head. And as an example, if I go back to the 3D view, you can see as I come over here, there's that dead spot right there. It's not moving when I move my head anymore. Okay, that's a little extreme. I don't actually move my head that far and look at the monitor. I would have crazy eye strain and I would get a headache. But just to illustrate the point. So what I do is straight up and down, and then I tilt the clip a little bit so that it gives a little bit separation in between each of the lights, the LEDs. And that just gives me extra room. And then what I do is move left to right. That looks good. Up, down. That looks good. And you don't really want to like go completely left, right, up, down, because you're never going to do that. So just the real extent of where you expect, and just kind of move your head in a rolling motion. Nothing crosses. We're all good. The next thing I want to cover up here is above it is motion controls. Now, the motion control is a slider that goes from 0.1 all the way up to 5. And this is basically a multiplier. So if I'm sitting here and I put this at 5, and then I slide the slider down to 0.1, you can see it moves it over to about 0.1 on the graph left to right. If I go up to 5, it's going to multiply it roughly by 5. Let's put that right back where it was. We're over here at 5. Yep, and it tried to go over to 25, which would be a multiplier of 5. So this is kind of a movement multiplier. Now the smoothness, this I leave at about 10, and I do mess with it from time to time. But essentially, if you go all the way down to 0, it's going to show you all the head jitter your head has. Kind of looks like a VR or watching somebody play VR. If you go all the way up to the top, this is basically, it kind of everything lags behind. So I have some movement, and then it kind of catches up because it's taking all of the movement in between and trying to make it a very nice, smooth path. I leave it at about 10. Some people probably go down to about 5. Very snappy when you do that. 10 is great for me, so that's probably a good place to start for anybody. Okay, so over under advanced settings, we also have a profiles tab. Now, when you have when you're starting out, you can pick from one of the profiles that are already here. You can see I have DCS is one. We'll get to that in a second, but there's usually 3. I think default, smooth, and 1-to-1. 1-to-1 is very much 1-to-1. If I move my head 20 degrees, it moves literally 20 degrees. So not something we really want, because if I need to look to my far left 90 degrees, I would have to physically move my head, and actually the sensor will not work. So it's more of a precision mode. If you want very huge movement for very little movement in the game, you would do that. For DCS, not applicable. I don't know anybody who uses this, at least without changing the motion control speed up to like 5 so you can amplify it. And if you're going to do that, why use 1-to-1 anyway? The next one is smooth. This is the one I typically use, but I actually modify it. So it was more of a baseline for me, but we're going to modify one from scratch, and we'll go through that process. So what you're going to want to do first, you're going to want to hit this plus icon, which is going to give you a new profile. We'll go ahead and name this one DCS2 because we already have a DCS one. And that'll create that profile, and we're going to go ahead and click the X here to the right to make it exclusive. This means that this is the only profile we want to use. If you uncheck it, it will give you the drop down and it'll default to the wrong one. So this way, it's the only one that we're going to use. The other thing you're going to want to do is hit the save button. You're going to want to hit it often. Now, the next thing we're going to adjust is the hotkeys. The hotkeys are basically center, pause, precision, profile. The only one I use is center. I don't ever pause it. Some of you might like to. You can set that hotkey to whatever you want. On top of that, you can set the precision to whatever you want. That turns precision, standard camera mode on and off. And profile will give you a different profile, but we're exclusive anyway. We don't want another profile. I'm going to go ahead and leave it on center. I'm going to click the button, and now I'm going to click a button on my HOTAS, and that will go ahead and set that to center, and now it recenters whenever I push the button. Next, we're going to come over to the bottom here. This is where you make all the fine tuning that is specific to your setup. This is specific to your distance from the monitor, the angle that you're going to end up looking to reach the extent to look behind you or above you or wherever you want to look. And that will reduce the eye strain. Because if you take somebody else's profile and you're looking all the way over here because their monitor was closer, your monitor is much further away and the extent is here, now you're having to move your eyes all the way over to the left, and that kind of, messes with the muscles and you end up getting eye strain because of it. Okay, so the first axis we're going to mess with is yaw. And if you ever need to figure out what an axis is, the checkboxes on the top, you can turn them off. So if I want to figure out, well, what is yaw? I know yaw is turning my head left and right, but maybe I don't know what yaw means. So you can uncheck all of these boxes at the top, and this will give you only the input from yaw. If I move my head up and down, nothing happens. If I move it out, nothing happens. So if you're ever questioning which one you need to adjust, go ahead and uncheck all of them. I'll leave one check to find out what it is. But yaw is turning our head left and right. So to adjust yaw, we're going to go ahead and select yaw, make sure it's selected. Template, just leave as 1 to 1. It doesn't really matter. It's just a starting point. If I hit smooth, you can see there's already an arc here. If I hit dead zone, you can see it gives you a dead zone in the middle here. It's just a template to go off. It doesn't actually give you that. It just tells you if you were to put these points here, this is what you would get, right? That's not what we're looking for. We're going to customize this ourselves. So to start, you want to make sure that mirror is checked. That way when you edit one side, it edits the other. So if I'm going left or right, I kind of want that movement to be the same on both sides. So this is the part right here that I think everybody screws up on, and they don't set this up properly. When you set up the yaw, you want to have it set so that when you look and turn your head to the maximum extent of your view. So for me, it's these black bars. I have DCS in the background so I can see how far the screen is going to render. I don't use the full screen on this setup yet. DCS just doesn't perform well enough. So I kind of have this 3440 by 1440p setup on this huge monitor. But if I look at the edge of that black bar and turn my head so that my nose is pointed straight at it, I want this view to have 180 degrees right about here. That way when I turn my head, I'm looking right behind me, right? And as I move my head, that's behind me. I don't want 180 degrees to be here because that serves no huge purpose for me. If I'm looking behind me, I want to be looking behind me. So what I do is I take one of these points and I'm going to move 2 of these inward a little bit. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I'm going to need those later. I take this third one and I'm going to turn my head until my nose is pointed at that edge. I can see where that red line is, and I'm going to put this point right above it. And I'm going to move this point all the way up so that I can see where 180 degrees is. Sorry, I'm moving my head at the same time to try to show you. But so here's 180 degrees, right? Now I said I don't want 180 degrees here. I want 180 degrees roughly over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it down until I can kind of tell where 180 degrees is by watching it move, right? So right here it's closer to center. And as I move it over to the left, just kind of gauge it a little bit, probably right about there. Close enough. We'll fine tune it in the game, but just want to get it kind of close. And then the idea is I kind of want it on a curve. So as I'm turning my head, it increases in speed to get to that 180 degrees, right? Because I can't move my head 180 degrees. I have to get to, I don't know, 45, maybe less. What is that? It's probably 30 degrees. So in that range, I don't want a ton of movement in the center. So I keep this to about 2, maybe a little bit higher than 2. The next one I'm going to move up just a little bit more. And then the one here, I'm going to move up a little bit more. And that kind of gives me that curve. So now when I move my head, you can see I'm actually at 180 degrees. Way before I expected it to. So I'm going to bring this one down. Actually bring it down a lot. I messed that up. There we go. That seems more accurate. So now left to right looks pretty good. I can hit 90 degrees by looking right about here. Then just a little bit more movement. I'm here now. I can see 180 degrees. And we'll bring it down just a little bit more. I think I went a little too aggressive. And then the next one, we're just going to flatten it out. Okay. And the last one, if I ever get to this point, something's wrong. So that's pretty much it. I kind of like that little flowy curve. You guys can change it to your liking, but now you kind of hopefully understand what each of those points represent. The bar here on the bottom, the line is my actual degrees off from center, and this is kind of the multiplier. What do you want to multiply that by to get there? So now we'll move on to pitch. Now pitch is pretty easy. I basically want to move my head up about 20 degrees, and I want to see straight above me. So move my head up, grab this point, and actually we'll move it over a little bit. I can have some room in the middle. It's probably pretty good. Go a little higher. Yep, there we go. There we're up about 15 degrees, and I can see right above me. And down's about the same. I want to get there pretty quick. I don't want to have a ton of curve on this. And then when we get to the top, slow it down a little bit there. Again, if I get to this point, if I can move my head 45 degrees, I can't see anyway. I'm just going to have huge eye strain problems. There we go. It's pretty good. For roll, don't really care. I just kind of leave that alone. If you want to mess with this curve, that's fine. X, I leave alone as well. X is movement left and right. Y is up and down. This one, I amplify just a little bit, and they kind of put all these points together, which is slightly annoying. So I'm going to those a little bit here. I'm going to amplify that a little bit. Reason I do this is I don't want a whole lot of movement. I want to be able to see like over a canopy rail. So I move over to the right and up. I can see over. I want to be able to do that without having to bounce up and down in my chair and look like a fool. I'm going to go ahead and pull these apart a little bit. That's probably pretty good. Like I said, we'll get into DCS and we'll fine tune everything in a minute. Z is forward and back. I leave this alone. Apparently you can set this up on to zoom. So when you lean forward, it actually zooms in game. I've never done that. If I figure that out or I have a need for it, maybe I'll make another video or post it in my Discord or something, but not for me. I use a slider on my HOTAS. So that's it. We just set up all 6 points. We're good to go. So now let's jump into DCS and we'll go ahead and fine tune it. Okay, so we got DCS running. Now, basically what we want to do is check all of our movements down, left, right, and we'll get to that in a second. I've switched the view so that you guys can see from behind and kind of see my movement. Hopefully that helps. So first thing we're going to check is the yaw, and what we want to do is move our head left, right, and what we're looking for is when I get to this point, I can see behind me. Now, that's pretty much what I can do. So if I come left, I get to this point, my nose is pointed right at that border for DCS, and I can see right behind me. If I go a little bit more, if I really need to, I can. And the idea is that when I turn my head, I'm looking at this portion of the screen right here. I'm not looking over here. If I have to look over here, I'm going to end up having to move my eyes all the way to the right. That's going to give me eye strain, and that's going to give me a headache. And so I don't really want to do that. So what I'm looking for is that I can see everything I need to see in this portion of the screen, and what I expect to see is behind me, and there it is. Looks good. Right side should look good because the left looked good and everything's mirrored, and there you have it. So next, let's check pitch. Go ahead and look up, down. Everything looks good. I can turn my head. I can see everything here. I can see everything here. Up looks pretty good. I think I can increase that one a little bit more. So let's go over to pitch on the drop down, on the axis drop down, and we'll just increase that just a little bit on every single point because I want that to be a little bit faster. So there we go. There's center. Yep, feels pretty good. Turn my head. Everything looks good. I can read everything. Snappy. Cool. So pitch feels good. Next is roll. Roll, we don't really use too much. I think that feels good to me. I think the points that I would use it are if I'm rolling and want to kind of see everything level, I would roll my head, but for the most part, not a concern. Next is X. X was left and right. Feels pretty good. I can move all the way over to the left, all the way over to the right. Doesn't feel like I'm straining in any way, obviously. The next one would be up and down. Up feels good, down feels good. Kind of gets there pretty quick. Like I said, I don't want to have to push myself out of my chair just to look up, so or just to move up the view. So just a little bit of flexing those butt muscles, get yourself up there. We're good. Okay, next is going to be forward and back. Obviously, that one feels pretty good. So I think the things that you want to check are, can you look at your DDIs, move left, get in there, click everything, move right, click everything, you can see all your controls, or all your gauges rather. And yeah, I think this feels pretty good. We hit it pretty spot on. If you need to make any adjustments, you can adjust them while you're in DCS. You don't have to actually leave DCS and come back in. For instance, if I wanted to change the yaw, go ahead and do that real quick. Say I'm here, I want it to be further, I can pull these all the way up and do whatever, right? Now everything's really snappy. Obviously this isn't going to work for me. So yeah, I think if you guys can get the yaw figured out and you're not straining your eyes to look where you want to look, just remember you want to be able to see what you're trying to look at the angle you're looking at, and not so much turning your head to then refocus your eyes to the extent left or right. If you get that solved and you get the camera in the right position and the IR sensor will move your head and nothing's clipping, you guys will you'll have TrackIR set up and it'll be great. So thank you guys. Hopefully this helps you, and remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time.